Today we are going to introduce a book called Prisoners of Our Thoughts, which is an extension of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was the founder of logotherapy. He passed away on September 2nd, 1997. But before he died, the authors of this book, Pattakos and Elaine Dundon, found him. They told Frankl that they were planning to write a book on the methods one could use to find meaning in life. Frankl was very happy to hear that and encouraged the two young authors to write an excellent book. The book outlines 7 principles that, if followed, can help us find meaning in life. Let me first talk about Frankl's life story. Viktor Emil Frankl was a psychologist born in Vienna, Austria. He was born on March 26, 1905, the same day Beethoven passed away. Frankl often joked with his classmates, "What a catastrophe! Beethoven died and I was born." He was self-deprecating. When Frankl was 16 years old, he gave an important speech titled The Meaning of Life. Just imagine a 16-year-old giving a speech on the meaning of life, and he spent his whole life helping himself and others explore the meaning of life. I think that's quite admirable. When Frankl was 19, he published a psychology paper in the prestigious International Journal of Psychoanalysis at Freud's invitation. That same year, he met Adler, the author of What Life Could Mean to You. He published another important paper in the International Journal of Individual Psychology recommended by Adler. At 21, he came up with logotherapy. The word logo was used in logotherapy. As we know today, a logo represents a symbol or graphic. The root of the word comes from Greek, where logo means meaning. When we design a logo for a company today, we try to extract the meaning of the company's existence. So this marked the beginning of logotherapy in psychology. In 1938, when Frankl was 21, he opened his own psychology practice and gradually parted ways with Adler and Freud because they had different interpretations of psychology. Unfortunately, after the outbreak of World War II, Frankl was arrested in September 1942 for being Jewish and was sent to the concentration camps. He was detained in Dachau and Auschwitz for over 3 years, enduring tremendous suffering. His parents, wife and brother all died in the camps, but he himself managed to survive, relying on his strong beliefs and pursuit of meaning, and wrote about his experiences in the well-known book Man's Search for Meaning. When Frankl entered the concentration camp, he brought with him a thick manuscript of a book he had written called The Doctor and the Soul. As a prisoner, the manuscript was confiscated and burned or discarded by the Nazis, never to be found again. But Frankl believed he must rewrite the book, so whenever he could find time and paper in the camp, he would recall the contents of the manuscript and write it down. He felt that the constant process of redeeming and recalling the manuscript gave him the motivation to survive the concentration camp. So as long as one has motivation, aspirations, and purpose, one can endure the tremendous suffering in the camps. As Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." I watched Life of Pi again the other day. There was a tiger on the ship with the boy Pi. Pi said that if that terrifying tiger had not been on his ship, he might have given up on life early on. Because he had a belief that he must survive, he must not be eaten by the tiger, so he had to keep the tiger alive. Therefore, he spent tremendous effort feeding the tiger, which enabled him to survive the long drift at sea without losing hope. This shows the significance of meaning in our lives. After reading Prisoners of Our Thoughts, I gained tremendous insight. What we constantly talk about as positive energy and a life full of positive energy. What exactly is positive energy? It is the feeling you get when you connect with meaning. The same thing, eating a bowl of rice. If you feel it is completely meaningless and boring, then there is no positive energy. But if eating this bowl of rice brings back memories and feelings, allows you to experience family bonds and care, then it has meaning, and the feeling of eating becomes positive energy. So the same thing can either be positive or negative energy. The key is whether you can connect it with meaning. The authors summarized 7 handles for finding meaning in life, or 7 principles. The first principle is free to choose your attitude. If you have read Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you will understand this completely. Every person has an ultimate freedom in life that no one can take away, the freedom to choose. Because at any time, in any situation, you can make completely different choices. Frankl realized in the concentration camps that human nature develops towards 2 extremes in the same adverse environment. Some people became extremely despicable, shameless, helping the Nazis, betraying others, stealing from others. Others became extremely saintly, making great efforts to help others. sharing their last piece of bread with children, cheering up one another, singing songs, doing everything to help people survive. Why did this divergence happen? Those who became vile would say, I have no choice. This is just how the environment is around me. I have to do this to survive. You see, they felt they had no other options. But from those saintly people, Frankl understood that we can still make choices. We can choose to show nobility and compassion even in such a terrible environment to demonstrate trust in human nature. This illustrates that a person always has room for choices. So why do people fall into the prison of thoughts? A very important reason is that humans are creatures of habit. People don't actually like thinking. The human brain is not a mechanism that likes thinking, because in primitive societies, the more you thought, the more energy you expended, and you delayed hunting. So people rely on habits. I saw a sentence the other day that described it well. Many people think they are thinking, but they are actually just reorganizing their prejudices. We have prejudices in our minds that we constantly reinforce and enrich, believing our prejudices become more and more correct. Then we carefully comb through and think through them again and again, reinforcing our own prejudices. But when we still can't resolve contradictions with others, still can't find flexible solutions. So when we fall into such inertia, you will find that we ignore our own potential and that of others. This sentence is very important. If you have read The Third Alternative and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the core is that you need to know there is room for change in yourself, and there is room for change in the other party. So if you have the right and room to make choices, so does the other person. When you don't ignore your own and others' potential, you can find flexibility in thinking and thus break out of the prison of thoughts. Typical characteristics of prisoners of thoughts are complaining and hating every day. They often say, I'm used to doing it this way, or that will definitely not work. If you make a suggestion to them, they always say, that definitely won't work. You don't stand a chance. I've tried many times, doesn't work. In short, they reject and resist all kinds of changes and new options. So what is real optimism? Let's look at how Frankl did it. Frankl had a coping motto. He said, if there was a 100% chance I would be killed on the spot, I could not possibly live out the rest of my life here in the camp. If there was no such chance, I had to concern myself with doing my very best right now, this moment, to make my life meaningful, regardless of what camp I might be sent to next, regardless of what dangers might threaten my life, as long as there was any chance for survival. You see, this is logic. If I'm about to die immediately, then I can't live out my life. If not, I had to take responsibility for my life, starting now, whether I was sent to one camp or another, whether I encountered danger or not. As long as there was any chance for life, I had to make the most out of it. You could call this a coping motto, not a coping mechanism. It was a sentence I chose to live by at the time. When he could start separating himself from his personality and observe himself, the pain and suffering he was experiencing then turned into material for the rest of his life. He thought that one day when he would tell others about this period of his life, it would be so meaningful. So he started feeling how he would tell it, what details here, what details there, to help him get through the most difficult time. Many people could not get past it. In the camps, some cried out loud when their shoelaces broke, and others knew they had lost the will to survive. But when you can take it as material for your life and know that one day the miserable experiences will become wealth in your life, material for your speeches, that's powerful. As Plato said, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. This saying makes a lot of sense. Why is this related to viewing yourself from a distance? When you know you are fighting a tough battle and have compassion for yourself, then you can take better care of yourself. Otherwise, you are fighting alone. But when you can view your own life with care and affection, your mood will be much better. There is an exercise here to practice this self-distancing technique. One day when Frankl was working in the labor camp, the shoes under his feet broke. You know, if your shoes break in the concentration camp, you're basically going to die soon, because if you walk slower, you'll be dragged out and shot dead. It's extremely dangerous. He felt he was done for. His feet hurt so badly, his body was full of fatigue. No one gave him water under the scorching sun, and he had to keep working. He thought he would die for sure today, that he might not survive today. And in that moment, he suddenly came up with the self-distancing exercise. Why? He said, at the moment when I could hardly bear it anymore and was on the verge of giving up, a thought flashed through my mind. and I saw myself standing on the podium of an international psychology conference, wearing a fine suit, addressing the conference about the very situation I was in now at the labor camp. You see, when he started separating himself from his personality and observing himself, the pain he was experiencing turned into material in his life. He was thinking that one day he would use this segment of his life as material when speaking to others, so this life must be so meaningful. This coping motto that Frankl talked about refers to an important set of basic principles or guidelines that helped him overcome formidable challenges. He made responsible choices and commitments in advance, maintained the necessary basic attitude to survive, so he was confident that he could cope with difficulties, and lived each additional day in the camp to the fullest. I remember in Master Shuyun's chronicles, he wrote that once on the street he encountered a Japanese soldier. The soldier pointed a gun at him and asked if he was afraid of being shot dead on the spot. Master Shuyun said almost the exact same thing as the passage above. He said, "If it's my fate to be killed by you, what is there to be afraid of? Because it's fated. If it's not my fate for you to kill me, there is even less to be afraid of, so there is nothing to be afraid of." This is their coping motto. So based on this coping motto, let's look at what real optimism is. First, being able to foresee the consequences of one's attitudes and choices, as well as various coping possibilities. True optimism is not thinking everything will turn out well. The key is first to know your choices will lead to different results. Second, and more importantly, having the passion to take action and turn the possible into the real. You see, you have these possibilities of choices. You need to have the motivation to act, to have the drive to make it happen, in order to realize the choices. So in essence, we make 3 choices. First, we choose a positive attitude to cope with the current situation. Second, we creatively imagine what may happen. Third, our chosen attitude ignites our passion for action to turn the possible into the real. This is the first principle. We must know we always have the freedom to choose our attitude towards life. There is an exercise here to help us learn the flexibility of choices called the Top 10 Positive Outcomes Exercise. For example, you are very worried every day that you might lose your job, which is a terrible thing, so you feel anxious and depressed every day, trapped in this nightmare, unable to break out. What should you do? Go home, take a blank sheet of paper, write down, if I lose my job today, what would be the 10 benefits? If you have watched a lot of good movies, you will find many movies have a pattern where the protagonist encounters something really bad in the beginning, but later realizes it was life's gift. Let's brainstorm, for example. If you lose your job, first you will have more time. You didn't have time to rest before, now you can rest. Second, you can stop and think carefully about your own thoughts. Reconsider if there is anything you really wanted to do in life but haven't done yet. Third, take this opportunity to reflect on what you did wrong before. Fourth, might there be possibilities to find ways to earn 10 times more money? Why do so many people in society earn 10 or 100 times more money than you when you only think about earning that little salary every month? Fifth, you will have time to chat with your kids and accompany them. You see, just off the top of our heads, we can think of many different positive reasons. This is an exercise everyone should do, and I believe after doing it, you will feel suddenly enlightened because you know you always have room for choices. This is principle 1, freely choose your attitude towards life. The second principle is pursue meaningful goals. Many of us confuse goals with desires. I want an iPhone. I want to buy a house. I'd be great if I got the renovation done. I need to buy a... If our goals are only material things, house, car, money, children, you will find you can never be satisfied in life because no one can gain everything through external possessions. So if we take all external pleasures as our goals in life, we will never be happy in this lifetime. This is certain. We need to learn to discover meaning. But people fall into the maze of meaning, a term the book uses, meaning you don't know where the meaning of life is. Frankl made a particularly shocking statement. He said, "Does the life of a monkey used for medical experiments, who dies from the experiments and is dissected, have meaning?" In human eyes, the monkey's life has a lot of meaning. It helped us find medicine and cured many people, but the monkey doesn't know that. Although the monkey doesn't know, does it have meaning or not? It does. So in life, we often face one maze of meaning after another. We don't know the meaning of what we are doing, but you have to believe there must be meaning. So in this process, the most important thing is that we constantly discover meaning ourselves. As Socrates said, a life unexamined is not worth living. That is, if we live every day just under KPIs, all kinds of material KPIs we set for ourselves that we must fulfill one by one, that is an unexamined life. You have not walked out of the maze of meaning. This book tells us meaning cannot be created, it must be found. I remember in Man's Search for Meaning, there was an old man who came to Frankl for counseling. He said, "My wife passed away. We lived together our whole lives. Now we're both over 80 years old. My wife passed away, and I feel there is no meaning. I feel I can't live on. Life is too meaningless now. I lived only for her, but now she has died, so I want to die too." Frankl asked him, "Imagine if you died first and your wife was still alive. How would she be?" The old man said, "Of course she would be very heartbroken too. She would be as heartbroken as me because she loved me so much." Frankl said, "You see, that's the meaning for you to live on. You living longer means bearing the pain so your wife doesn't have to." So a lot of meaning requires our discovery. We simply lack the ability to discover meaning, which leads us to be trapped in the maze of meaning every day, unable to find our way out. This is a very interesting thing in life. When you can discover the meaning behind what you do in life, you immediately find the kind of positive energy we talked about earlier. Camus also conveyed such a profound philosophy. Life is very likely meaningless, but the search for life's meaning is itself meaningful. Same logic. The process of walking out of this maze of meaning is itself very meaningful. So the second principle is to pursue meaningful goals, not just stare at material goals. There is an exercise here called the meaning mining exercise that you can try when you go back. Whenever you are in a particularly challenging environment, or you feel it is a very important moment in your personal life or work, you can ask yourself these questions. They can help you find meaning in that moment. First, how did you cope with the situation or life at that time? What did you do? What did you think? Second, what feelings did you have? What emotions emerged? Third, what did you learn? What new knowledge and skills? How have your attitudes changed? Fourth, how will you grow from the experience? How will you apply what you learned, especially key insights about yourself, to your personal growth? That is, the method of discovering meaning is to reflect on these questions. When we experience something that may be very painful, stressful, or perhaps quite joyful, afterwards ask yourself, what did I learn from this? How did I handle it? What could I have handled better? This accumulation process is the process of constantly finding meaning and grasping it. So there is an important sentence here. Meaning is not so-called important events, but resonance with one's core essence or true nature. Meaning is when you feel resonance with your true nature or core essence. That is called meaningful, not the event itself. So life is not just about tasks, it is also about a mission. Our lives are not just tasks assigned by God that you must complete just like others do. Rather, it is a mission. What do you intend to devote this life to? That is called a mission. So I will assign everyone an exercise. Come up with a title for your autobiography. Suppose you were to write an autobiography about yourself. What would the title be? How would you refer to yourself? This is likely related to your mission. The fourth principle is never do anything against your will. The author talks about how he was promoted to department chair as a professor at a university. When he heard superiors were coming to inspect, he suddenly became excited. He felt this was a chance for him to accomplish something and contribute. So he did a lot of work, trying to make the inspection go perfectly. But because he was trying so hard to cater to the inspection, the result was all his colleagues and employees were unhappy with him. I'm sure you all have this feeling. When I was up for promotion at the university, I really wanted to get a title like professor or associate professor. So I looked at the requirements, and however the requirements went, we had ways to cater to them. Publish a certain number of papers at a certain level, publish certain kinds of books, one book substitutes for a number of papers, etc. Now looking back, I feel so ashamed. This is doing things against your will. The matter itself was not what you really wanted in your heart, but you were driven by desire. You really wanted to obtain that thing, so you did things against your will. The result of doing things against your will is you drift farther and farther away from meaning. When you look back afterwards, you feel you wasted your time and life. We want to please others through perfect performance and efficient work, but often when we most want to please others, we put ourselves in an unfavorable position. We overlook the true goal of the pursuit because we overemphasize the end result. That is, the work is not about pleasing someone, but should connect with your meaning. So there is a term here called paradoxical intention. Paradoxical intention means the more you want to get that title, the more you want the audience's approval, And now, the more you want some kind of big award, the more your behavior becomes distorted. You drift farther away from it. If you don't believe me, you can try it. Next time you have a speech in front of 1,000 people, stand up thinking, today I must become famous. I must make everyone like me. My whole life hinges on this one speech. The more you think that way, the more your actions become deformed. You express things in that speech that you didn't intend to express. But if you understand this, if you understand the problems paradoxical intention brings us, we can use it to cure many fears. When you can expose the worst, it is called paradoxical intention therapy. That is, we deliberately exaggerate the fear, which enables us to confront the fear more directly. For example, someone who sweats whenever nervous, armpits sweating profusely, feels embarrassed by it. Think about it. In the summer, when everyone is normal, you have large wet patches under your arms. So he feels embarrassed and is introverted, afraid to talk to people. Later, the psychologist taught him to say, upon seeing people, "It's raining here again. It's starting to rain again. You see, I'm drenched in sweat." First, tell everyone about your drenched armpits before anything else. Since there's no cure anyway, first get the full body sweat thing out there, then talk about other things. Then it's no longer an issue. It's over and done with. Then another funny doctor. We all say doctors have terrible handwriting. Doctors' writing is often illegible to others. One doctor was always afraid his writing was too sloppy, always worried others couldn't understand it, and eventually developed a psychological condition about it. He no longer had confidence to write for or show people anything he wrote. Later, the psychologist told him, "Today, make it your mission to write the messiest thing ever to show me. Then make an effort to write messily. The messier, the better." After writing it and turning it in, others could still make it out. The doctor felt relief. That is, expose the worst thing. Someone got pulled over and warned by police for running a red light. After being warned, the person, having learned about paradoxical intention, immediately said, "I'm wrong, punish me. I really shouldn't have. How could I run a red light? That's so dangerous." You see, you expose all the worst possible situations. You give voice to all the worries and fears in your heart. The policeman, upon seeing this person react so strongly, said with just a "be careful next time," and let him go. You see, if you don't pretend, if you don't overly protect yourself, you can know paradoxical intention can be used for treatment. Expose its terror. One principle here is that every problem has at least 3 or more observational perspectives, maybe not just 3, even 5 or more. The same thing can be looked at from completely different observational perspectives. But this requires flexibility in thinking. If you fall into the prison of thoughts, become a prisoner of thoughts, you will find it useless. Only this way works. So let's keep our thinking flexible. When facing conflicts, don't cling too much to self. Don't always think about anger and defiance, but think about where else we can find perspectives on this issue. There is a term here, I feel the translation is a bit odd, called logotherapeutic diminution. This logotherapeutic diminution actually means shifting attention creatively. The most typical example is the Italian director Roberto Benigni's film Life is Beautiful. The father and son are taken to a concentration camp, and the father tells the son, "This is a game. Whoever can win in the end gets a tank as prize." You see, this is remarkable, and that little boy sees his father being ordered around and even beaten and tortured by the Germans, yet the boy thinks his dad is playing so well. Dad must have reached a high level. It makes your heart ache watching it. After that movie came out, many internationally, especially Jewish people, criticized Benigni for using dramatic techniques, exaggerated techniques to beautify such painful history, taking such misery and making an absurd game out of it. But in fact, many don't know that Roberto Benigni's Life is Beautiful is adapted from his father's experiences in the concentration camps. This was based on a true story. So if we can understand the complexity of human nature, we can learn to forgive others and transcend self. Only then can we find ways to connect with our ultimate meaning. So learn to shift perspectives and use logotherapeutic diminution to view the difficulties we encounter in a new light. There's an exercise here you can do when you go back called mental travel. You sit here, close your eyes, and feel what it's like to be traveling. Switzerland, Austria, skiing around the Alps. When you realize your mental life can transcend reality, you gain a lot more freedom. This is one way people find freedom. So when we use logotherapeutic diminution to shift the focus in our lives, we will not be trapped in the present and constant struggle with pain. Remember that every problem has at least 3 or more observational perspectives. The last principle, number 7, is dare to transcend yourself. Do you know why our eyes can see the world so clearly? Because the eyes cannot see themselves. When our eyes can see themselves, there is a problem with the eyes. That is, some people have eye conditions like fundus albipunctatus, cataracts. Only when your eyes have a problem can they see themselves. An image appears before you. But when there is no disease, the eyes transcend themselves. They cannot see themselves. They can see the whole world. This is a metaphor. So most of us live paying attention to self, selfish. But when we can walk out of self and start serving others, you will find the world is so vast. In the concentration camp, Frankl and the others all hated one of the guards at first, thinking him a German who bullied them. But later, after they left the camp, they found out that guard had bought a lot of medicine with his own money to keep many of them alive. He was actually a benevolent person who hoped to keep those Jews alive. But because he was a German officer, he had to fulfill his duties. So Frankl said we cannot easily judge someone by external appearances. People can be very different from how we imagine. Daniel Kahneman, author of Thinking Fast and Slow, became a psychologist because when he was a 13-year-old Jewish boy walking on the street after curfew, a German officer came towards him. He thought, "I'm doomed. I'm finished today." But that German officer didn't catch him. Instead, he asked where he lived, gave him some chocolate, and showed him a picture saying he also had a son the same age as Kahneman, and took him home. Kahneman was suddenly struck by the complexity of human nature. In the Jew's eyes, the German officers were simply devils, but here was such a kind person who treated him that way. So if we can understand the complexity of human nature, we can learn to forgive others and transcend self. Only then can we find ways connected with our ultimate meaning. So those are the 7 principles from this book as an interpretation of man's search for meaning. Using these 7 methods, we can quickly walk out of the maze of meaning. But everyone is still worried. Are 7 methods too many to remember? So later this author further condensed it into 3 methods called OPA. What does OPA stand for? If you say 7 is too many for me to remember, 3 is enough. The first O is others. Build meaningful connections with others. As we talked about earlier, finding meaning in every moment, treating others as ends not tools. These are all about building meaningful connections with others. The second P is purpose. Have a higher purpose for the work you do. No matter what you do, don't think only about money or titles or self. Can you think about the greater meaning? The higher your vision, the higher your ceiling. The third A is attitude. Use a positive attitude to embrace life. You can always choose a more positive attitude to embrace life. The author divides people into 4 quadrants. Some people's lives are very unsuccessful, some very successful. That is the horizontal axis, from failure to success. The vertical axis is from despair to meaning. No meaning, despair, depression, suffering. Meaning, empowerment, sense of justice. This results in 4 types of people. There are those who are both successful and meaningful. Then there are those whose lives are not very successful, failures, but still find meaning in life. We call these poor but happy. So I think the top 2 are directions we can pursue. Although we can't get rich overnight, if you are willing to shift your thinking and connect with meaning, it is very possible to become a meaningful and purposeful person overnight. This is called poor but happy and noble in riches, the top 2 quadrants. Below you will find some people whose lives and work are very unsuccessful and who are also very desperate, no meaning at all. We call this the fish quadrant. And the other quadrant is called rich but vulgar. Very rich, lots of money, but nothing else beyond money. Everyday gambling, playing cards, doing all kinds of chaotic things, but spiritually empty and suffering. We hope everyone can compare against these 4 quadrants. You will immediately see that the dividing line between a happy or unhappy life is not the line between success and failure, but this horizontal axis. Whether you can find meaning in life. Being able to find meaning in life, you can become poor but happy or noble in riches. And the methods for finding this meaning in life are that we need to learn to use OPA, build meaningful connections with others, find greater meaning in our work, and use a positive attitude to embrace all of life. Only then can we improve others' lives, and in turn, improve our own lives. The last 2 chapters of the book talk about OPA in work. You know, only 30% of people in this world are diligent at work. That percentage may even be an overestimate of people who can actually be diligent and work hard. Most people muddle through work painfully, enduring the necessary evils of life. I'm exchanging this suffering for money to support my whole family. I have no choice. But actually, if we can get these 70% of people to build meaningful connections with others, rather than treat others as tools, If we can find greater meaning in work, then I think solving 70% of people solves the world's problems. It will allow everyone in the world to live happier lives. There is also OPA in society. We all live in this society. We see a lot of news disorders, many people under high pressure, lots of bad news every day. How should we deal with it? Can we build meaningful connections with the whole society? Can we find a higher goal for ourselves in this society? Can we do something for this society? If we can spread love in this society, there will be an echo effect. In the valley, if you curse the valley, in a few seconds the valley curses back. If you love the valley, in a few seconds, the valley loves you back. This is the echo effect. The echo effect in society is very obvious. So if we all use OPA in society to make it better, then we can improve others' lives, and in turn, improve our own lives. After Frankl passed away, he left behind a tremendous legacy for the world. His life story was made into a movie. There is a Frankl Museum in Vienna, and a large number of books related to logotherapy. Stephen Covey wrote a special foreword for Prisoners of Our Thoughts, though Stephen Covey has also passed away. In this book, Stephen Covey said, "To know and not do is not to know. That is, we must diligently practice the things we learn. Only through practice and use can we truly find meaning and happiness."